and welcome to Americans Abroad. I'm Jen, and this is Stephanie. And today we are going to have, you know what? I don't think we've ever introduced ourselves before like that. Surprise!
Surprise!
Episode 20.
You get to learn our names.
We play hard to get. I'm Jen, and this is Stephanie, and we talk about life abroad. Today we're going to be talking to Marcos Chiluisa from EcuaAssist all about how to move to Ecuador. And I actually want to kick off today like a 13-year-old by popping out my diary and telling you my experience last year when I went to Ecuador. We had our first group scouting trip in November. And I didn't get to do the whole thing because of time, but we went and spent a few days in Cuenca. And it was really important to me. And I just want to explain why. So if y'all will indulge me as I get out my pink fuzzy
all written in bubble letters.
Yeah, in code. Okay. I said, here is why joining the Ecuador scouting trip was so important. Being raised evangelical, I attended Southern Baptist Church and I went to an Assembly of God school through 8th grade. I was assigned to read a best-selling book about some missionaries who were killed in Ecuador. Not to blame the victims, but the mission was called Operation Savage in the local language. And the missionaries thought they'd won over the remote, famously violent Amazonian tribe by dropping gifts from their airplane. In fact, they thought the warriors who eventually killed them were actually coming to ask for rides on the airplane. But more than that, it was portrayed to us that all of Ecuador, and maybe all the world aside from the US and Europe, was like this. Full of bloodthirsty, uncivilized killers who might murder you just for sharing God's word. But what I found to be true is that Ecuador, just like my hometown and the rest of the world, is filled with ordinary people trying to find love, raise happy families, do fulfilling work, and live in healthy communities. And also, just like my hometown, has some problems. Cartel activity and corruption, especially in Guayaquil, affect local security. Cuenca, where we visited, had just over 8 murders per 100,000 people last year. By comparison, the city I'm from, Birmingham, had 81, and Guayaquil, the most dangerous city, had 39. Besides that, there are different laws amongst indigenous groups, and they're allowed to police themselves, and they have some policies that the average American might consider to be vigilante justice. But personally, I would rather stay in my own lane and not judge those groups. What I believe is that Ecuador is the friendliest, warmest, most welcoming country I've visited yet. It makes it easy to move there, not just logistically, but emotionally as well, because people are so kind and open. I can only hope they never read that book.
That's lovely. That's really, I got like a little like emotional, just, thinking about, especially us in the US, I feel like we're only shown like the bad stuff. Like it is, America's the greatest country in the world. And when we look outside, it's the highlight of the death and the murders and the natural disasters and all of these things. So, to have someone like you, like myself, like our Expatsi audience who have made the move, who are adventurous and will step outside of that comfort zone and go like, no, I really want to see what it's really all about. And recognizing that like deep down, we're all just the same. We all just, want to have a happy life and a healthy life and, find joys in the day to day, to varying degrees. And just recognizing that that is really like the universal experience.
I agree. And it scares me because I spent decades believing that Ecuador was primarily jungle with uncontacted tribes because information was kept from me. Yeah. And I thought that time was behind us. I thought that as time wore on, the country would get more progressive because this information would be shared. In a lot of ways, it has.
Yeah.
People forget we're in the middle of Pride Month right now, and I commented in the newsletter that I didn't know an openly gay person until I was at my second job out of college. That is how different things were, and there are
Yeah.
a lot of things that have improved because the ways that people can share information.
Mhm.
But my biggest fear is going back to a time where people don't have info. And the funny thing is that as much info as we can share, misinformation just spreads like
So rampant.
wildfire. Oh my gosh. I mean, the craziest, a conspiracy theory pops up before the real story hits the ground. It's
Mhm.
just wild. And I think maybe that's my neurodivergence is being very truth seeking
Yeah.
and fact seeking. And it scares me. There are facts. We're going to talk to Marcos very frankly about crime in Ecuador. They have had an uptick this decade. Um, it doesn't affect everyone, but it exists, and we don't want to bury our heads in the sand about it. But I just fear so much the control of information inside the US
Mm.
and the wildfire spread of misinformation. I think it is the biggest danger to society.
I think more than anything, it makes us afraid, which takes away our curiosity. And when we can continue to be genuinely curious about the world around us, genuinely curious about other people, it allows us to kind of open our horizons. Uh, Yesterday, I was going through my Facebook memories and realized that it was I believe, the 10th anniversary of Anthony Bourdain passing. And I reread
Wow.
this thing that I wrote, um, thanking Tony Bourdain for being this person that through food and travel, like we talked about that, like at the end of the day, we're all just kind of the same. We want the same things, we appreciate the same things, our stories are similar, our wants for our families are similar, and having, this snot-nosed kid of a chef who became this personality. And that was like the power of Tony Bourdain, was going into these places that people didn't normally travel to and sitting down with people that a tourist wouldn't normally meet, eating a dish that a tourist might be afraid to try, and
Mhm.
igniting curiosity in the American population. So I think that really resonates with me. It really comes down to not being afraid to be curious at the end of the day. And that's how you get exposed to this wonderful world that we live in. Today, we have Marcos Chiluisa from EcuaAssist to talk all about moving to Ecuador. Marcos, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for that introduction.
Absolutely. So I understand that you're an expat too. You're an immigrant as well. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Venezuela. My parents actually they are expats. They immigrated to Venezuela back in the 70s when it was the boom of the oil industry in Venezuela. So I was born and raised in Venezuela, and then we moved in 2000 when Ecuador became. I mean, it was the anniversary of the dollarization when I moved to Ecuador.
Explain what you mean by dollarization, because I don't know if everyone listening understands that benefit of living in Ecuador.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, when in January 9th of 2000, Ecuador made official as the currency the dollar. Ecuador before it had what a lot of countries they're having right now, problems with inflation. Problems with inflation because government I don't want to get into any political uh, uh, conversation right now, but when governments they don't have money, they start printing money without any supporting backup. So what happened in late 99, in late 90s in Ecuador, they have so much debt with the teachers, with a lot of people. So they start printing money, and the inflation, it was skyrocketing. And since January 9 of 2000, Ecuador, that we don't have our own currency, but we have the dollar, so we don't have the power to print money. So that limits the and at the same time, that's a benefit because we're limited to the printing of the money. We don't have inflation like other countries have. We have only the dollarization that allowed us to keep a stable a price of everything in the market.
And it's a huge benefit for Americans because everywhere else you go, aside from, I guess, Panama, Belize, you have exchange rates. And so you have to pay some percentage in exchange fees. You have to deal with arbitration. But when you are moving to Ecuador, it's dollar for dollar. So whatever price you see on a menu is the price that you pay, and you aren't doing that math in your head. So, as someone who lives in Mexico, I know that stories about things like crime can be grossly over exaggerated in the US. I know that Ecuador has gone through some turmoil. And listen, I don't want to get into politics either. Let me tell you, everybody will be delighted not to talk about politics for the next 30 minutes. But there has been a surge in crime. Do people need to be afraid? Is it localized? What is it like on the ground? I was there in November and I felt safe as a clam, and I didn't see everybody was so lovely and kind. So, what is it really like?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I this crime topic, it started in 2022 when one of the largest media in the US, they made a big article. And what I always say is like, media and press, they want to sell news. That's a business. That's how they generate income. So what happened? This is my reading of what happened back in the time. What happened was like, okay, well, this is a country where historically never has been like a country with any or major issues with crime, and now it's a big thing. So that's my reading on that. But regarding the people living in Ecuador, this is always I say this: unless you are in the drug business, human trafficking business, then you should be concerned. If not, you can live your life, day to day life. You will be absolutely safe, and you don't have anything to worry. Of course, I mean, you cannot walk in the middle of the night in downtown because it might be a little bit risky. But in general, if you stay with everyone, with a lot of people are, you will be okay. And of course, I don't want to be naive, but something that concerns me a lot is like casualties, and you never know when this is going to happen. And but crime in Ecuador, they have the crimes against their own. I mean, between gangs. So they mostly are very focused and in very specific areas. It's very hard to see where they go and do commit some crimes related to the drug trafficking and human trafficking and all those business in other areas that they're not their own.
Would you say that there are certain areas that have less activity than other areas?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Cuenca is one of those. Actually, Cuenca in 2025 was, and still, but in general in South America was nominated one of the safest cities in South America. And in Ecuador, Cuenca is the safest city in Ecuador. Then it follows by Cotacachi, Vilcabamba, Loja, and some areas in Quito, the Cumbaya area, where is the most absolutely safest place in all Ecuador.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your honest answer on that question that I know a lot of our listeners have. So, what is it about Ecuador that makes Americans want to move there? And are you seeing an increase in Americans wanting to relocate to Ecuador?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this topic. I'm personally passionate about this. when I have to speak about Ecuador. Uh, and I always say it's not about the currency, it's not about the US dollar. That actually in Ecuador, I mean, I always ask this, when it was the last time in the US when you have the chance to buy something with a quarter, with 25 cents. Actually, in Ecuador, you can use coins. With 25 cents, you can buy 5 or 6 bananas and probably 2 avocados. But that's what the money goes further. The If you're using the dollar, of course, the quality of the food. We have food all year round. The weather is a spring, like it's like in the 70s all year round. And of course, the quality of life, I mean, your health will get increased because you start walking more, you start eating better. But those four are not the main reason why Ecuador is a good expat destination. The main reason why Ecuador is a good expat destination, and it's hard to find in other places, and is it's people in Ecuador. They are very, very friendly. They are welcoming towards North Americans. And this is very unique. And what is towards North Americans? One of the theories I have, and I want to be very, very sure with this, is back in the time when President Kennedy was in office, he created Peace Corps volunteers. And when Peace Corps volunteers came to Ecuador, they started helping a lot of people, teaching agriculture, teaching about business, teaching about a new language, and a lot of things. So, in the back of the minds of 5 generations right now in Ecuador, there is this perception towards North Americans that they are coming to help. They're nice people. So whenever they see you walk in the street, they associate you with that. They see you as a nice person. That 5 generations, they perceive North Americans like that.
And have you seen more Americans exploring moving to Ecuador, especially in the last few years?
In the last 7 or 8 months, we have been very, very busy in our office. I've seen every time more people asking on Facebook how they can get help and relocation, uh, visas, but also health insurance. But it's just like the last 7 months when we got increased. But back in the time in 2009, 2010, it was the big boom of Ecuador, and still is there. And we you can find expats. They have been living in Ecuador for 15 years now. Um, I mean, they go to other countries. They go to Portugal. They start traveling all around the world, but they always have their heart with Ecuador, and they are always in their minds coming back to Ecuador.
So, how can people move there? I'd like to go through some of the visa paths because I think Ecuador has a lot of options other countries don't. For example, will you tell us about the professional visa?
Yeah, for the professional visa, basically you need 3 requirements. One is to get registered your diploma. You don't need a business plan. You don't need to own a business or create a business. You don't need to get a job. The only thing you need is your diploma. Once your diploma gets registered in Ecuador, and on top of this, your FBI background check if you're coming from the US, and state level background check if you're coming from the US, or the RCMP background check if you're coming from Canada or from any other country, your background check, those are the requirements that you need to get the professional visa. The minimum income required for this visa is $482. And if you are in your account, if you are receiving in your account for the last 3 months before the application, $482, then you qualify for the professional visa. The processing time of the professional visa in Ecuador is taking right now 3 months. And the processing time of getting registered your diploma in Ecuador, it takes 2.5 months. So in total, for the professional visa will be from the beginning of collecting your documents in your home country to your visa gets approved, it takes roughly 6 months.
Can you do that from within Ecuador or do you need to do it from the US?
Oh, you can do it from the US. You can do it from anywhere. I sometimes I recommend to start the process before, because by the time when you enter Ecuador, you can start the qualifying to get the permanent residence visa, because for you to get permanent residency visa, you need to have the temporary residency visa at least 21 months. And after that, you become eligible to apply for permanent residency in Ecuador.
That's so short. What about you have pensionada and rentista options, right? Rentista.
Yeah, rentista. Yeah, that's a good R pronunciation.
Thanks.
The rentista option, it's the passive income. If you have a passive income, let's say you have an investment or you are renting your property, um, this passive income is more than $1,446, then you qualify for the rentista visa. Of course, you need to have a contract that says that you are getting paid that amount of money every month, but also you need the bank statements showing that that amount of money actually you are receiving that payment every month. That's the rentista visa, and on top of that, the background check. And then we have the pension visa. The pension visa is for those who are receiving whether it's Social Security letter benefits or Veterans Affairs letter or any other pension that as long as you are receiving a minimum of $1,446. And again, it has to match with the your bank statements. And here's something important. In Ecuador, the requirement is $1,446. And actually, you can live well in Ecuador with $1,500 a month. There are other countries that the minimum is 1,000, but then your expenses to live in that country is 2,500 minimum. So
Costa Rica.
Yeah, well, yeah. So then in Ecuador, with the minimum $1,446, you can make a good living in Ecuador with $1,500 a month.
I will say we saw some apartments in Ecuador I would move into tomorrow that were amazing penthouses that, oh my God, it's beautiful. Okay. I don't want to get off on a tangent. So also there is an investor visa. Tell us about that.
Okay. For the investor visa, the minimum requirement is $48,200. And you can invest in real estate or a certificate of deposit in an Ecuadorian bank or shares in an Ecuadorian company. For the real estate, I always recommend wait 6 months before buying anything. So my initial recommendation is not to go through real estate for the investor visa unless you have done your research and you are 100% sure that that's the place you want. The second option of the certificate of deposit in an Ecuadorian bank is probably the most secure because and I think it's better because Ecuadorian banks they pay you between 5.5% to 11% interest rate, and you can collect that money monthly or you can get paid at the end of the year. But that's something that you can get those rates in Ecuador.
That's I for those of you who aren't watching Jen and I on video, I think both of us just had like the surprise face emoji. We search out for banks with savings accounts that will pay you 1.5%, and we feel like we're getting away with a crime. So 5 to 11%, that is phenomenal. You mentioned investing in real estate, and so I'm kind of curious. Are there houses available? Under 50,000? And also, what do things generally cost, especially in a popular destination like Cuenca?
Normally in Ecuador, and I'm going to speak in square meters. In Ecuador, the most expensive square meter that you can find in a nice building with amenities like pool, private security, the most expensive that you can find in Ecuador in a building like this, it will be 2,900 per square meter. And of course, you can go a lot more. You can go up to $10,000 per square meter. But if you want to buy the house under $50,000, there are some options. And those options are where it's like a complex of houses that they are built next to each other. You can find probably a 3-bedroom, two bathroom apartment with a small yard, and of course you have to share your wall with your neighbor, and you can find those houses between 45 to $50,000 in places like Cuenca. But of course, I mean, you can find something that is super nice between the ranges of 70 to 150. That will be something that it will give you a good idea on a housing or an apartment, a condo with the US standard constructions.
And then what about other items that go into cost of living? You mentioned being able to buy, your fruits and vegetables for under $1, but what about things like utilities, gas, anything else that folks have to factor in when they're budgeting for their move to Ecuador?
Yeah, absolutely. For example, for utilities, for rent, no, for I'm sorry, for electricity,
Mhm.
you will be paying between $60 and $70. If it's a two-bedroom apartment, for cell phone, you will be paying $25. Water sometimes is included with the HOA fees. What else? The gas. I mean, we still have good gas prices in Ecuador. But in general, if you are planning to live in Ecuador, your budget for expenses, uh, not including rent, we're talking about between $500 to $600 a month. If we are adding rent to that, you can find rent between $500 to $800, and you can have some room to other miscellaneous expenses.
It's so nice. Now I know cars are a little bit more, but in Cuenca, I didn't feel like you had to have a car if you didn't want to.
Yeah, I mean, cab rides, and also this is what I recommend to my clients: get two or three drivers that you know them, and they will take you anywhere. If someone is busy, you will go for the second one in line. Like cab rides in Ecuador, they go between 150 to $5. And I mean, if you don't want to drive, if you don't want to drive, that's a good option. If you need to buy a car, you can buy cars. And cars in Ecuador, they're expensive. I mean, a decent car, you can buy it for $9,000, but of course you can go up to $30,000. And right now we have a lot of Chinese cars, but yeah, cars are expensive in Ecuador, but you have the option of getting a cab for you to get around.
I love the Chinese cars. That's what I want here in Mexico when it's time for us to get a new car. So, what about healthcare? What is the quality like? How do expats access it?
Okay, all right. In Ecuador, um, we have universal healthcare. So if something happens to you, the public system will take care of you. They If you go to a public hospital, they will not be asking you if you have insurance. They just will take care of you and they will take care of the bill. But if you want, you can, I mean, expats, they need to have insurance in Ecuador. Once they get their visas, they must have an insurance. In Ecuador, we have private health insurance and we have public health insurance. With the public health insurance that is handled by the government, they have good infrastructure. But the problem with the public health insurance is that sometimes it's overcrowded. For you to get an appointment, you have to wait sometimes months. If you are lucky, few weeks, but normally you have to wait several months. If you get private health insurance, the private health insurance, depending on your age and I mean, pre-existing conditions, you can get it from 150 to $350. That's the most expensive health insurance I have heard. And there is another thing. Ecuador passed a law probably 5 or 6 years ago where people with pre-existing conditions, they still can get health insurance. That's not a limitation for you to get health insurance, as long as, I mean, you declare those pre-existing conditions. The prime will go a little bit up, but you, by law, you are protected to get health insurance.
So, who is Ecuador best suited for? Who should explore moving to Ecuador?
Who People who are willing to get a pace of life more relaxed, where because something that is cultural in Ecuador is just like things move in a slower pace. Actually, I remember we went in the scouting trip last year, and we have to wait for the servers to come for, I don't know, several minutes, and
Minutes, Marcos.
and it was a waiting of 35 plus minutes that we have to wait for them. And I mean, if you're in a rush, Ecuador is not the place for you. If you are accepting and embracing the culture of like, and this is something that happened to me actually, because I was living in Quito and then I moved to the coast, and the coast they take 1 hour lunch break. They go out and have lunch with their families. But I was coming from Quito where everything is super fast. And for me, it was like, I didn't understand what was going on. But that's normally what you will be finding in Ecuador. So it's just like for people that they want a slower pace of life.
Fantastic. Well, if you are interested in learning more about Ecuador, our Ecuador scouting trips, and how you can work with Marcos and his team at EcuaAssist, visit expatsi.com. Marcos, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Hey, Jen, do you know what time it is?
I do know what time it is.
What time is it?
Born ready for this. It is time for listener questions, and we have a great listener question this week. But in order to hear it, you will have to hear my song. I wrote. It's kind of like a rappy kind of song. It's like a spoken word song. And I also wrote this in my journal as well. So, my story about Ecuador and the lyrics to the song I wrote. Okay, you ready?
Let's go.
Okay. And sing along if you pick up on it. Okay. G-O-T-O, G-O-T-T-O, Baby, we have got to go. G-O-T-T-O.
Original choreography, original song by your two favorite podcasters.
I do have red hair, I want to point out.
If I could only find a pink fringe like leotard, and then we can go the full thing. Tours coming to you summer of 20. We'll be at Coachella in 2027.
And we don't want your kids looking at us.
Facts. Just in general, it has nothing to do with our celebrity. So this week we have a question about money. This listener writes in and asks, given the current political/economic environment, what concerns do you foresee for the value of the US dollar throughout the world?
So this is a great question. And the Expatsi official policy, which is we do not predict the future. This is really important to us because we don't agree and we're all wrong. And if you spend too much time trying to predict the future, you will end up doing nothing. Because what if the dollar goes down? What if the dollar goes up? What if the dollar goes up and down? What if the dollar goes down and up? Excuse me, Ron. And so what we recommend is that you just plan the best you can, presuming that it will go down, that it will go up, that it will go down and then up, that it will go up and then down. And what would you do in the absolute worst case scenario? What will you do in the absolute best case scenario? The truth is, we don't know. I do think, God, I love an optimist. I married one. His catchphrase is everything always works out. And girl, it don't.
My anxiety.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, here's why it works out. It's because I am behind the scenes making it all work out.
Mm-hmm.
But I love an optimist, whatever. But
yeah,
what if what if Social Security ends? Because you have no control over it. You can do your best. You can tilt at windmills. You can be in a Facebook group. You can go to a march. But what if it ends? What are you going to do? And you need to know, what if your money becomes useless? Keep in mind that if your money becomes useless, So does everyone's. Every American is now impoverished. So we're talking Mad Max at that point in time, right? So let's be real. You know, if it's Mad Max, it's Mad Max. And, we got other problems to deal with. But it might go down. The dollar has gone down since we moved to Mexico. So it made my rent go from 1,300 to 1,550. So what am I going to do? So I have to make $250 more, or I have to allocate $250 more. So you do need to be prepared that it will change. Embrace yourself for that. But if you were thinking about economic collapse, then we're all going to be in bunkers with those big crates of powdered food, right? And is that who you want to be? I prefer to not live that way.
Well, if you have a question you'd like us to answer here on the podcast, you can email your question to podcast@expatsi.com. Americans Abroad is an Expatsi production. Please like, share, subscribe, and leave a review. Are you thinking about moving abroad? Start with our quiz at expatsi.com. That's expatsi.com.